coming off the bye week and um, certainly got what we needed accomplished, which was did some self scouting, did some work on USC, got some work done in the weight room, some work with our players from a developmental standpoint, and then got on the road recruiting. So that was a lot of the things that were in front of us and accomplished, and some rest. Getting the guys the ability to get some time off too. They were in midterms and needed to finish up academically, and so we were able to check all those boxes. Now we get to get back to it and play our rival USC. Obviously, didn't play them last year. Excited to get this going again, especially back here at home. A talented football team every year. I think we say the same things, and certainly this team is one that, if your name is London, you're really good, both on offense and defense. And certainly Slovis is an outstanding quarterback. Again, USC is going through a coaching change. We understand that, but this team plays extremely well. Against Notre Dame, it's a rivalry game, and they've played very well on the road, and I'm sure that's because they can get away from the distractions that they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis, and so we expect to get the best version of USC, which will be a very good football team. So, having said that, this will be a great challenge for us. As I said, from a defensive standpoint, Jackson, outstanding player. The middle linebacker is really good. This is a veteran team. I mean, they've got a lot of starters back on both sides of the ball. The return game is really good, and Slovis and London obviously are an outstanding duo. So our guys are excited to get back out on the field. We're certainly looking at the second half here with some home games here in the next 3 weeks, and a really good challenge to see where we stand after the midway point. So with that, we'll open up the questions.
John Finneran is first.
Hi, Brian. I wonder if you can bring us up to date on some of the injuries you've had. Tyree, Mayer, Barong, and anybody else who might have gotten hurt.
Well, I'm not going to be searching, but I'll give you Kyrie has been cleared. He practiced last week. Mayer looks to be 100%. He weight trained and looked really good, so we feel good about him being at 100% for us. Kane Barong tore his MCL, so he'll unfortunately, in a non-contact situation, just one of those unfortunate situations, so he'll be out for the year. Buckner good. He was probably, I wouldn't say he was 100% last week, but he got a lot of reps and should be 100% for this week.
What were some of the things that, you said you used last week to look at yourselves and work on things that you feel like you need to improve? What are some of those areas?
Yeah, there were a lot of things, obviously, that we needed to get better on. I thought that what we wanted to look at in particular were some things defensively in terms of reaction. I thought we were, and after talking to Marcus, just some reaction things that occurred both in certain areas of the field that we didn't recognize. So we needed to see those again and I think just react to them better. It wasn't necessarily scheme as much as it was time and place and seeing it and going over it and getting it to the point where, when things like this happen, how we can react faster. From an offensive standpoint, cleaning up some pressures into our run game. A lot of times you look at your run game and, you're blocking, certain players, but if, for example, you're running your counter play and there's a blitzer, do you pass up somebody to block somebody else? Things like that. So some of the nuances really within the game was what we spent a lot of time. It wasn't just singularly blocking guys or defensively, fine tuning a coverage as much as the nuances of the game that have been showing up over and over again. So we needed to spend more time, slow it down, walk through it, show it on film, and make sure that we're better for it moving forward.
Eric Hansen is next.
Brian, after the last game, you weren't quite sure what the next step was with the quarterbacks. Now having kind of a week to breathe with that, what do you feel like your intention is going forward? What's the next step? I mean, maybe you're not at the final step, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from a quarterback standpoint, Jack Cohn continues to be the guy that we feel like gives us the best chance to win, and mixture of him with Tyler Buckner. I think both of them. Drew has done some really good things for us, and if we feel like we're in a situation where we need to call on him, we would. But I think right now, as we look at it, it's probably in my mind, and I know in Tommy's, that Jack would start, and we'll continue to get Tyler more playing time.
I noticed that Michael Carmody moved over into your tight ends this week. Is that maybe to help get you through until Bauman comes back and Evans isn't out the first half, or is this something that might be able to help you long term?
I think that's all of that, a combination of all of those things, and I think that with Alt, being the left tackle, now Carmody kind of slips into that, little bit of do a little bit of everything for us. So I think that kind of services that role for us, and he's a big guy that can add some size into that 13 package for us too. Now, when Bowman comes back, we'll see where we are, but for the immediate purpose of needing that next tight end, he definitely serves a great role there for us.
It's big recruiting week, and I wanted to ask you about your use of the Ag Diago service. Have you done enough with them yet to get some tangible results, an impression that you can share?
Yeah, we did a lot of the baseline testing for that. So, a lot of the baseline numbering in terms of, where you fit on that scale starts with a lot of our players. So we're very familiar with it. It helps us in terms of giving us, a pretty good sense of, some of the traits that we're looking for that you might not necessarily be able to get on some of the evaluations and visits. You're looking to try to really drill down deep on some guys, and we felt like this service, allows us that opportunity to gain some more depth of information.
Last one from me. I didn't see Kristofic listed as a guard this week.
Yeah.
Is he maybe your starting guard, or is he still an option that you bring in off the bench?
Yeah, no, he would be listed as the starting guard.
Tyler James is next.
Brian, we've talked about sort of Tyler Buckner getting the whole offense at his disposal last game in the Virginia Tech game. I'm curious how the play calling can be evolved to help Jack Cohn more, if there's anything that can be done to maybe get out of him what we saw at the end of the game against Virginia Tech. Have you been thinking about different ways to do that, or is that just getting him to do what he's supposed to do during the game?
I think it's a little bit of both. Let's look at it from this perspective, right? When has he looked really good? Late in the game, right? Those defensive linemen are chasing Tyler Buckner around, right? They're tiring out a little bit. So that pass rush is not quite the same in the first series or the second series as it is in that last series. So, there's a little bit of that. Jack speeds up a little bit in those late drives where the ball comes out a little bit quicker. There's more of a sense of urgency. So I think it's a little bit of both. I think the pass rush tends to to lay down a little bit later in the game as those guys are running sideline to sideline, having to chase all game. And then I think Jack's sense of urgency in terms of getting the ball out is a lot more deliberate. So I think we gleaned a lot from that in our bye week in terms of what we needed to work on maybe earlier in the game for, Jack and being more efficient.
And then how do you get the running game to be more efficient as well when Jack is in the game as opposed to Tyler? Because we've seen the success with Tyler in the game, but what are the keys to getting that a similar level of success? Maybe it's not as successful, but to that success with Jack Cohn in the game.
Yeah, I think it's a process for us that we feel better about right now. I think we, obviously we've made some changes on the offensive line. We think personnel makes a difference. We think that, certainly Tyler adds a little bit more balance there because when you have to defend the quarterback, obviously he gets you more diversity. But I think you're going to continue to see an uptick in terms of the running game and its consistency, and that's what we're looking for.
And then lastly, on recruiting, I wanted to ask, you guys have had a pretty successful recruiting cycle in the 2022 class. I'm curious, do you feel like anything you guys are doing is resonating better with these recruits, or you guys are just doing a better job in sort of getting that message to them?
Well, I'll say what I said before is that I think, blending, tradition with current success has a lot to do with it. 2 out of the past 3 years in the college football players, there's not a lot of resumes that have that with the tradition that we have and the ability to talk about our brand and academic success. Now, a lot of that also equals you got to work at that. So I just think it's a blend of all those things together, have, allowed us to, certainly, get the kind of recruits necessary for us to be, in the mix with the very best in the country.
Tim Priester is next.
Just to clarify, Brian, how close is Kevin Bauman to coming back?
We think he's within 2 weeks, give or take. He'll have another bone scan this week, and then I think we'll have a really good sense of where that leaves us in terms of exact time frame.
What did you see from Logan Diggs? I mean, his first game at running back in a difficult environment. What did you see from him, and can you get a third running back involved in this offense?
Yeah, we really liked what we saw. I thought that his poise, his ability to block and pick up some blitzes in a late game situation, I think was probably, if there was one thing that kind of gave us some confidence in him, that really stood out to us. His patience, all things that, look, they're all coachable traits, but some of them are not teachable. You either have it or you don't. And so I think those kind of came to the forefront in a, very action-packed environment. And so it was pretty impressive.
A couple years ago, you did a great job on Michael Pittman. Not that you're going to give away your game plan on Drake London, but how in the world do you stop him from catching the football?
Well, we're just going to do what Stanford did. I don't know, maybe steal a couple of their, he had 4 catches against Stanford. Certainly you can't do what Stanford did, but this is a really, really good football player. And you have to have a plan for him, just as we had one for Pittman and the other players that they had. If you just line up and just say, okay, we'll live with what the consequences are, it'll be like George Karlaftis at Purdue. Like, we couldn't just line up and say, George, just rush the passer. We had to have a plan for him. So we'll have to have a plan for him as well.
The players are on mid-semester break.
Yeah.
I wonder, in years past, have you found that it's easier to get their concentration when they're not in school, or the opposite?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I think what happens is that the mindset is one where, you have to be careful that you don't jump off the treadmill in terms of this season is such that you're on this treadmill and you're focused on, the season and the routine. And if you totally jump off it, it's hard to get right back on it and start this. So we've been very careful to talk about, let's turn it down a little bit, but we can't get away from it. Like, you just can't, stop training. You can't stop thinking about, what you need to do to stay ready. And so we've been very, very focused on that in our off week and leading up to today about turning it down a little bit, but really amping it back up as we get into game week.
You talked about self-scouting. You faced some of the better defenses in the country.
Yeah.
Do you take solace in knowing that may ease up a little bit, or you don't even consider the opposition in terms of from a self-scouting standpoint?
Well, we know we've played some really good defenses. Wisconsin, Purdue, Florida State has some really good athletes that fly around the field. Certainly, Cincinnati is a really good defense. So we know we've gone up against some really fine defensive structures and some players that we have to pay attention to, and we'll have some against USC. Having said that, it has seasoned some of our players, and in particular the offensive linemen, Tyler Buckner, Styles, and some of the younger players. So we think that after 6 games, it has given them the opportunity to really feel confident that they can go out there and compete at a high level.
Thank you.
Patrick Engel is next.
Brian, on third down defense, it seems like you guys have a lot of different looks you can go to that have worked well, whether it's dime or dollar. I'm just curious how that's kind of come together to the point where it seems like you kind of have all these different tricks in the bag, I guess, that have made that a successful down for you guys.
Yeah, it's still about efficiency on third down. It's still about, some of the problems that we addressed this week in terms of the ball getting outside our defensive structure. So, there's still work to be done there. And that's really been about, as I said, situational awareness. We had a scramble against Virginia Tech where we're, plastering on receivers, when the quarterbacks cross the line of scrimmage, and we got to be so much better than that. And so even if you're in those kind of third down dime and dollar packages and nickel packages, there has to be better awareness where the stakes are, where the sticks are, getting the ball on the ground, making tackles. So we really just spent much more this week in those packages, not adding anything more, but just being more fundamentally sound and smarter as a defense. And so I think if there's one thing that there needs to be a takeaway is if we can get smarter there, we can be better.
And then on third down on offense, it seems like no matter who's been at QB, they look Avery Davis's way a lot. What about him just seems to get guys to trust him pretty quickly?
Yeah, I mean, he's just a veteran player. He's in a position at the slot that gets matched up quite a bit with linebackers. So the nature of the position. We were playing without our best offensive player in Mike Mayer against Virginia Tech, so he got targeted quite a bit maybe in that game, and maybe the optics were such that that's the way it was. But I think our guys are pretty confident getting the ball to a Braden Lenzy or a Mike Mayer or Kevin Austin. I just think he was targeted quite a bit, in particular Virginia Tech, maybe because of the situation.
And then lastly, Jacob Lacey, after leaving Virginia Tech, I'm wondering what his prognosis is.
Yeah, I'll have a better idea today when we move him around. He has an ankle sprain. We put him in the boot for 3 days. He was out today, weight trained. We do a short kind of 20, 30-yard movement, and he looked pretty good there, but we got to put him out on the field before I could get a better sense of where he's at.
Your next question is going to come from Zoom. Heather Dinich, you can go ahead.
I was wondering about where you feel like you are as a team, because when I saw you after the Wisconsin game, you talked about still trying to find the identity. And now with the self-evaluation things you spoke about, and being certain that Jack Cohn is your guy, just where do you think you are and how close are you to where you want to be?
Um, we're we're a pretty resilient, tough team mentally. Our guys will battle, but we're still learning in many ways. We have a lot of young players. I think we had 5 or 6 freshmen on the field on the offensive side of the ball in the last game we played late in the game. And so I think that's a never-ending process for those guys to continue to grow. But they know how to win. And so I think as we stand here today, they have a great way about themselves in terms of they believe they're going to win, they're confident, they keep playing, but they have to understand that they don't have much margin because they don't have a lot of experience. If they keep that in mind and stay focused on the details, they can win every game they play.
Pete Byrne is next.
Hey, Brian, you just mentioned again your team's resiliency. We've heard you talk about it a lot this year. I'm sure you'd love to be in a position where you don't have to make a fourth quarter comeback every single game the rest of the way. It's obvious.
They give you 4 quarters.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's not unentertaining.
know.
I promise. Yeah, that's for sure. You talked about Jack's sense of urgency that you see late game. Do you feel like across the board, like is that where it needs to be, or do you feel like it's not there yet? And if not, how do you coax that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, look, we would like take bits and pieces of how we've looked. The first drive at Florida State. The first drive against Cincinnati. I could give you a lot of examples where the first drive we looked like, wow, that's a pretty good, indication of this team has really kind of turned the corner. And then, it's one mistake here, one mistake there. I still think it's just, maturation and, 11 players pulling together as one. We had that more or less in the second half against Virginia Tech. We're hoping that was, a turning point for us offensively, that we can get more of that on a consistent basis. If we can, then, we're starting to talk about, more consistent play, because that's really what this is about, right? This is about being more consistent, running the football and being able to be balanced on the offensive side of the ball.
You guys have had a pretty good run of success against USC in the last several years, and particularly at home. And that's one of the more talented teams I think you guys play on an annual basis. Why do you think that you guys tend to play well against them?
Well, it's a rivalry game. We've had good players. Again, I think in these kinds of games, it's a tough trip across the country. We've got to go to Stanford. I get asked the same question, why we don't play well going to Stanford, and it's not that, we don't prepare well. It's a tough trip to make, and it's a good team you're playing against. You're going on the road. And again, it's a rivalry game. So, our guys get up for the game. They'll be up for the game. I think it's gonna be one where they want to get out of LA. They want to get away from the distractions, and so I think this will be a heck of a football game.
Pete Sampson is next.
Brian, I was interested in the quarterback room, how you sort of keep that positive and 3 guys pulling in one direction when they all want to play. Some guys are coming in here or there. Like how do you sort of make that work, and how important is it that you do?
Well, I mean, I think it starts with who you recruit, to Notre Dame, and the character of the kid, makes a lot of those things go away, right? The issues of being selfish or, not wanting to see others succeed, and that selflessness, has to be part of what you're looking for when you recruit. Now, they're all competitive, they all want to play, but I think if you're transparent and you're face-to-face with them and what you say is what you do, and you build that relationship with them, then you're going to have a room that the guys will work together. I don't think you ever get it, Pete, where it's like, I'm so happy not to be the starter, but you get respect and you get guys working together. Those guys cheer for each other and want them to succeed. And if Drew Pine goes in there, those two guys will want him to succeed because they generally respect him for the work that he does. And that's what you try to build.
What about like the development aspect of it? Like what you're trying to develop with Jack Cohn is totally different than what you're trying to develop with Tyler Buckner. So how do you sort of serve those masters, but not have it take over everything else you need to do with this team?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you have to pick your spots during practice in terms of when you are, trying to isolate your particular work for that player. We have another guy named Brendan Clark that we're trying to get ready too. I'll give you an example. Most of our 7-on-7 reps against our defense during the bye week we gave to Brendan Clark because we're trying to get the rust off of him and get him back. And so I think you pick your spots during practice to give them the dedicated work necessary to see their growth continue to happen. And it's something that Tom and I sit down and meet and talk about and have discussions about to make sure that it's not stalling the overall operation, but making sure that the individual continues to grow.
And the last thing, going back to Virginia Tech, when Tyler Buckner threw the pick, when he was looking at Colsey to his right, what did he see? What did you talk to him about on the sideline, and how did you sort of gauge his reaction to like that kind of mistake in that kind of moment?
Yeah. He was going off of a recommendation based upon what had happened earlier instead of going through a progression. And so the conversation was much more about go through your progression. Don't just assume something's happening because it happened the time before. And he didn't get much help relative to the way the route was being run. And so it was a great learning experience. Unfortunately, it put us in a bad spot. But he's so smart, and he understood it right away. And I don't think it's something that'll ever have to come back to, in not just that particular route, but in a number of different things that we laid down for him.
And we'll wrap it up with Chuck Freeby.
Have you seen any market changes in USC since the coaching change?
No, they've been consistent. They played great one week and then not quite as well the next, but talented, as a football team. And, if you go with win-loss, this should be, their best version of themselves this weekend against us.
How would you compare London to David Bell from Purdue?
They're similar in their competitive spirit. I mean, they are great competitors. They're different in terms of size, obviously. I think they're both, I guess, for me, guys that just have such an incredible high football IQ, understand the game, body leverage, and the yards after catch are what scare you the most. Pittman was a guy that you couldn't be deeper than the deep. I mean, you couldn't get deep enough. I think we played our free safety when we played cover one like 27 yards deep. I mean, it was the deepest I think we ever got our safety. We may not play 27 yards deep, but he's 6'4", and so you got different kind of issues with him. I think both of them are outstanding players. I just think this kid is just a ferocious competitor, and he'll block you. I mean, they use him quite a bit in the blocking game too, and he'll run you out of bounds.
I know you grew up watching this series. Mm-hmm. Of the games you have coached in, what's the most memorable one with USC?
Oh, boy. I've had a couple that have just been amazing. I don't know if I could pick one. We've had 2 undefeated seasons, at USC. Those were pretty special. So, I mean, it's hard to separate those two. And then, the first victory for me, in the rain at USC was pretty special too. But the most special would be beating them Saturday, that's for sure.
All right. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate
All right.
it.
Thank you.